Now, do we think we need a major rethink in how we teach our children in schools? Should we start, indeed, by scrapping the act of collective worship? Well, a report being presented to the House of Lords right now, and backed indeed by the former Education Secretary, Charles Clarke, says we should. He argues that schools need to move with the times and better reflect the cultural and religious makeup of the wider society. Free Presbyterian Minister, the Reverend David McElveen, is with us today, as is Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland. He's in our Dublin studio. Also joined by Kathleen O'Hare, who's Principal of Hazelwood Integrated College. Michael, let me start with you. I don't know if you had a chance to study this report in great detail, because it is being presented, as I say, right now to the House of Lords. But what do you make of it?
Well, the whole thing is an anachronism, really. I mean, it comes from a time when people didn't distinguish between church and state. And there's now a much more sophisticated understanding of human rights, that the right to religion is actually the right to freedom of conscience and thought and religion and belief, and that it protects atheists just as much as it protects religious people in terms of our beliefs. And really the way to look at it is, if a religious person imagined it the other way around, that if you were to send your child to school and the school every day had an assembly where children had to recite that there is no God, you would immediately recognise that that's not appropriate, that's not what schools are for, that schools, and particularly assemblies, should be for bringing everybody together with equal respect for all of their beliefs. And
do you not value in any way what religion brings to a school?
No, I don't. I think that religion is harmful to society. Now, I don't expect other religious people to accept that. That's my personal opinion.
Harmful in what way?
Well, in that it corrupts our sense of morality. That normally, when people are thinking about morality in the absence of religion, you would see things in terms of empathy and compassion and cooperation and reciprocity and fairness and justice. And you would try to be kind to people. You would say, what in this situation is going to cause the least unnecessary suffering? What's going to cause the greatest well-being among humans and indeed other non-human animals? Now, what religion does is it adds into that equation, here are some things that, even though they're not the compassionate thing to do, you should do it anyway because somebody wrote something in a book 2,000 years ago. Now, that's fine for religious people to argue in their churches, but they shouldn't be imposing it on publicly funded schools.
Kathleen, what do you think?
I would completely disagree with Michael. At Hazelwood we have 930 students, and they come from all faiths and none. They're either Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, Jehovah's Witness, Buddhist or Hindu. And we have about 100 of those students who have no religion. And I have to say that the school has a Christian ethos as well as an integrated ethos. We do have a prayer that we recite at assemblies, but it's a prayer that any of those children can actually say.
What's the prayer?
I could read the prayer for you if you wish.
Please do.
Our prayer, it's a prayer for peace, because the school is set up 30 years ago on a peace line in North Belfast. It's lead me from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead me from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead me from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our heart, our world, our universe. Peace, peace, peace.
You say that your school has a Christian ethos. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, the majority of our children will come from a Christian faith, and we have a lot of different commemorations and celebrations throughout the year, whether that's a remembrance assembly in November, whether it's our carol service at Christmas, and we tend to go every single year to a different church.
And what are you doing then for those non-Christians in your school? Because Charles Clarke is saying today that our education system is not fit for purpose, because there are a lot of people out there attending our schools who feel alienated at times whenever the school gets together for collective worship.
I would say that a school without religion is one which doesn't maybe fully serve our children. And I'm not saying simply about Bible and liturgy. I'm also looking at the whole pastoral element of the school, because we have a number of events throughout the year, like a bereavement service, where the children in the past year come together to look at parents, members of the family who've been bereaved. The whole pastoral side of a Christian school is extremely important in supporting people.
Surely you can't argue against that, Michael?
Well, certainly there's no problem with teaching about religions and beliefs in an objective and critical and pluralist way. I think that's important that children do learn to understand the different beliefs that exist. There's a set of principles called the Toledo Guiding Principles that's put together by the OSCE, which is the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. That's about how to teach objectively about religion and belief in a pluralist society, in a way that respects everybody's right to hold either religious or non-religious beliefs. And you're allowed under that to teach objectively. If you want to do something that is specifically teaching religious instruction, then what you should do is you should provide non-discriminatory opt-outs, and ideally opt-ins for the religion rather than opt-outs for the non-religion. But the question that I'd like to ask, Kathleen, there is, you say you bring the children to different churches so they experience presumably different belief systems in action. Would you also bring the children as part of that process to, say, a meeting of the Atheist Northern Ireland group so that they could appreciate what atheists believe?
Yes, of course, Michael, because part of our religious syllabus does look at the whole idea of all faiths and none. So we tend to, as well as looking at, synoptic gospels, we tend to look at also ethics, and very much a moral code as well. So we feel that our religious syllabus in the formal side of religion at Hazelwood is one that can be embraced by all faiths.
Well, why do you call it religion then? Why do you not call it something more inclusive that would include religious and non-religious beliefs?
Michael, we have debated this for a long time. In fact, we still debate the term chaplaincy, but the majority of our children are Christian, and we haven't come up with a better word that people understand than chaplaincy. And I suppose the chaplaincy is like a pastoral cloak around the college as well as a religious one.
David, can I ask you, how do you feel whenever you see reports like this being published today, whenever you see somebody like Charles Clarke, a former Education Secretary, coming out today and says we need to re-examine this whole relationship between religion and schools because it's simply not fit for purpose, and indeed it has been described by some as fossilised?
I think the great tragedy is that many people are attacking the very foundations of our belief, and Michael's points, of course, are very much, in my view, to be challenged and also to be rejected. To refer to religion as being a corrupt morality, I think is just totally reprehensible.
Well, a corruption of morality.
Well, same thing. But the missing point is this, that religion is not so much about a code of ethics or a code of practice. The basic principle of religion is directing people to a person. And to those of us who come from a strong evangelical background, we believe that it is our privilege and our obligation to point people not so much to the church, because the church cannot change people's lives. It is the person of Jesus Christ. And from a Free Presbyterian context, I'm delighted that many schools in Northern Ireland facilitate our child evangelists, both in assembly and also after school classes. So we're very grateful for those schools that provide us with the opportunity to
And
evangelise.
have you ever talked to any young person to ask them what they get from collective worship in a school? Have you ever put that question to them? How much do they value it?
Well, I don't think there's any, from my experience, there's any great value in collective worship, because I think people are individuals. And as an individual, people have a personal understanding of faith. Now, ideally, I would love people to be taught their faith in the home, but that is not happening.
So you would be supporting Charles Clarke here when he says that there's no need for collective worship? Is that what you're saying?
I believe
we should move on from that?
I believe we need to look at the whole concept of how we instruct children. We're living in a multicultural society today, and I believe there is much confusion. And I think Michael's contribution to me is categorised very much in confusion, because he's making so many points that really you miss the central point, the simple point. We need to see children's lives changed and transformed by the power of the gospel.
Michael, you're confused.
Well, no, I mean, what Dave is saying is his view, and what I'm saying is my view, and we're both entitled to our views, but independently of both of our views, the state should remain neutral on those views. The state shouldn't be taking sides between atheism and religion. The state should be providing a neutral educational environment where children can learn about all religions and non-religious beliefs in an objective, critical and pluralistic way. One of the things that both in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland that we should have learned over the last century is that majority religious rule is not a wise way of running society. And it's quite reasonable for David and anybody else to promote their religious beliefs within their churches, within their families, within their religious groupings. But the state should remain neutral on these things. And there's a lot of European and international UN human rights law that recognises now the equal right to respect for non-religious beliefs as to religious beliefs. And if you start from that perspective and say, how do we respect equally everybody's rights to their either religious or non-religious beliefs, it's obvious how you would structure society. You wouldn't have the state taking one side or another. And respect, the key thing about that in terms of respect, it's not just a question of allowing non-religious people to opt out from the default. We should be shown equal respect. And respect, again, the European courts have found, means more than just acknowledge or take into account. It means a positive obligation on the state to respect and take positive steps to respect everybody's beliefs.
Kathleen, some of the interesting things that callers had to say there, some of them touched upon integrated education here in Northern Ireland. Of course, you're principal of Hazelwood Integrated College, and you in fact are bringing more education into your school now because you're looking at the whole area of bringing in more chaplains.
Well, I think in a multicultural society and a multicultural school, it would be very dangerous to forget about religion, because not having anything about respect and people knowing about each other's religion would breed more fear than our traditional Protestant Catholic. And you can see that happening.
So you feel the need to bring in more chaplains?
Well, I feel the need to bring in chaplaincy to serve every child, whether they have all faiths and none.
But you can't do that. You can't bring in atheists under the concept of chaplaincy because it is contrary to our philosophical convictions. No more than if you brought in somebody who was to promote atheism or had a title relevant to atheism, said, well, this atheist person can also deal with religious people.
But atheists do have a code, and I have to say, if we take the word religion, and I know you won't want to call it that, but religion out of the school, we will actually lose a lot about moral arguments.
But I'm not suggesting you take it out of schools. No, I'm not suggesting that.
But what do you call it? If you don't call it religion, if you don't call it religion, what do you call it? Like children who are not taught any religion in school, either formally or informally, are not actually versed to go out into society.
Can you just say, first of all, what's interesting is that Charles Clarke today is calling for it to be known as religious and moral education and not just religious education and so on. So that taps into something what you've been suggesting there. Michael, go ahead, respond to Kathleen.
Yeah, well, I would go further now. I think they're separate things. I think that moral education is different to religious education. Religious education should be teaching objectively about religions and beliefs. And I think it's important. I'm not saying religion should be removed from school. I think it's important that children are taught about the different religious and non-religious beliefs that people have. But separately to that, there is ethics, there is philosophy, there is civics. Those are the areas in which children should be taught how to think generally about how within a society we can live together in a kind way, in a compassionate way, in a way that respects everybody.
Catherine, do you think anything's going to change by this debate today in the House of Lords? The fact that we have somebody like Charles Clarke saying we need to take a fresh look at all of this. Do you think is there will out there to change things?
I think it might in England, and I know that Ofsted in England, their inspectorate, have actually criticised the teaching of religion in about 70% of the schools. So I'm not sure where Charles Clarke comes from in this. The curriculum in Northern Ireland is set as a Northern Ireland curriculum, and we do not have morality and philosophy as part of that. We have actually religion, and there's an obligation on all Northern Ireland schools to teach religion. So I would doubt, unless we decide to go down an English-based curriculum, whether change would happen in Northern Ireland. And I don't think government would impose that here because, quite honestly, there wouldn't be the will to do so.
And do you think that your pupils are equipped to deal with the religions around the world, so to speak, to have a good understanding of what's happening out there whenever they see religion mentioned on the news, whenever they hear the talk of Islam, that they're furnished with all that information they need to know about other faiths out there, that they can make a proper judgment as to what's going on?
I think they are, and just as I was leaving to come down here today, I spotted 4 children walk to the next class together, and 3 of them are from different religions and 1 is from none. And I just happen to know them because I know them so well. So I can debate it from the fact that they're educated about it, but they can debate it from the point of view of a lack of ignorance because they know each other and they know each other as people.
David, I'm going to come to you as well, Michael, just to get a final thought. But David, you talked at the outset about an attack on Christianity. Do you fear that is what this is all about when we see reports like this, when we hear about discussions at Westminster around this pretty emotive issue?
I think it's got to be interpreted that way. None of us, of course, are those who maintain a monopoly of religion. I think that would be totally unacceptable. But what's coming out of this report is that to try and separate religion and morality is a major mistake. I think David's point, even though he was speaking from a non-Christian point of view, is a very valid one, that he has witnessed people's lives being changed by coming to the knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. Their whole morality has changed as a result of that. So I think for this report to make a distinction between morality and religion is a major flaw. And I think in Catherine's point about Islam and the questions you have raised, I think people are confused because we hardly know what type of Islam we are to listen to. There's such a variety of interpretations, even within Islam today, as we've discovered in the last 24 hours. So I think we've got to centre on what we believe is the right message. We speak of it in conviction and in compassion. And I think that's where we've got to come back to the person of the Lord Jesus Christ as the way, the truth and the life.
OK, last and brief word to you, Michael, just before we leave this. Do you sense that things are changing?
Yeah, I think the world is becoming more secular, and I think that that's a good thing. I think that people are increasingly learning to respect not only the right of religious people, but the right of atheists to hold our beliefs. And I would suggest to Kathleen that maybe one way of addressing this is whenever you're using the phrase religion, use the phrase religion or belief, because that then encompasses everybody's beliefs, whether they're religious or non-religious. And I'm glad to hear that you'd be happy to either bring your children out to, or maybe have somebody from Atheist Northern Ireland come in to speak to your children so they could get that perspective as well.
Okay. You're very welcome.
We'll leave it there. Kathleen, Michael and David, thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on the programme today.